What are some of the things that you do here that you like?
Play outside, and I like playing with my dog a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I like playing with Barbies.
Yeah.
And I like playing with my cat too.
Wow. Why don't you
Come
take
in?
it? Yeah, take us inside so we can see.
Well, this is my side of the teepee.
This is where you sleep?
Yeah.
Wow. And these are your things here?
Uh-huh.
Wow. What else are we looking at? This is where you hang all your things?
Yeah.
And you get the Christmas tree over there.
Yeah.
Did Santa Claus come to see you at the teepee?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now what's the cat's name?
Shadow.
Shadow.
How old is she?
She is going to be 2.
She's going to be 2.
And what else are we looking at over here? What's the thing made of wood in the center?
That's where my dad puts all his stuff, and where he puts the food and dishes and stuff.
Wow.
And he makes the food on there too.
Yeah. Why don't you come take us around and show us where you prepare the meals in here? Go ahead, Shadow.
Well, it's right here. It's a little stove.
So you got a refrigerator here,
Mm-hmm.
and you got a stove. I'm going to try to get in here without breaking anything.
And
Oh, yeah.
see, there's food here.
And then all the food is kept in the cupboard here.
And this is where my dad sleeps.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much all.
Yeah. And when you get a fire in here, is it pretty warm?
Oh, yeah.
Very warm? Wow.
I tell them how hot it gets sometimes.
About 100 degrees, right?
Yes, we've had it up to I've looked at my thermometer, which is hanging right there,
Ah, yes.
and that thermometer is read up to 120 degrees.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is the stove, and this is the man who feeds it, and the man who built who put the teepee up.
Yeah.
This is my brother Brian up here.
Hello.
And here's Genevieve up here.
Yeah.
My daughter.
I wonder if you could tell us how this all got started, and the process of making it, and the process of living it, and what your plans are.
Well, I've been wanting to do something like this for years and years. What I've wanted to do is live in a primitive structure like this for a full year and see what kind of subtleties we miss by living in a house year-round. I come from native ancestry. Both of my grandfathers and one grandmother were Abenaki. My grandmother could speak it, and my grandfathers could do certain things as well, so there's quite a strong influence of Abenaki culture there. So I wanted to go with a wigwam at first, which would have been traditional to this area. It's covered with bark, and it presented a few problems as to where I would get enough bark, and also the time in constructing something that primitive and making it authentic. So I decided to go with the teepee instead, because I could just simply buy the canvas and cut the poles myself, which was a little more of a process than I expected. Each of the poles needs to be cut in the spring or very early summer when the sap is in the bark, and that makes it easy for the bark to peel off. It just shreds right off, like peeling a banana basically. Then the poles need to dry for 2 to 3 weeks, and then they need to be sanded so that the rain up in the top of the teepee, which you can't see because of the insulation, but there is a small hole there that the rain will come through, and the rain will get caught up mostly in the poles, and if they're sanded properly, they will run all the way down the poles. The surface tension of the water will run all the way down the poles to the ground. So sanding them properly was quite a chore. It took a lot longer than I expected. Then I set up the poles. There's a diagram that you have to follow. There's a certain order that each of these poles has to go up in. So you don't just throw up a bunch of poles. You have to put them up in a certain order, and there's some geometry involved in measuring out how far they are, so that way the canvas will fit around them. But it is quite simple. A friend of mine helped me put it up, and we had the poles up in less than an hour, basically. And the canvas over it, I think from the time we started setting up the poles until we had the canvas completely on, was maybe 3 hours max. And that was our first time doing it. I think when we do it again, we'll probably cut that time in half easily.
Well, Dad, my mom helped us too.
Yeah, your mom came by and helped, and Jean, my friend Jean, came by, and Greg, and Grandmama and Grandpapa. So that was mostly what was involved. It was setting up the teepee. Modified the teepee so that it would be similar to a wigwam. In the wigwams, they had the outside wall, which was, or the outside of the covering, which was bark usually, and then they had an inside wall of woven mats, and in between the woven mats and the outside wall there's a space because of the poles that went up, and and that area was filled with grasses and reeds and things like that for insulation, and they're actually quite warm. In some of Thoreau's writings, he talks about some times he spent with the Penobscots in Maine, who lived in a very similar shelter, identical for all intents and purposes. And he said that, excuse me, that those wigwams that they lived in were by far more pleasant, they were warmer and kept out the drafts and so forth, much better than anything than the finer houses in Boston at the time. So I tried to duplicate that, but I ran out of time. I did start making some reed mats to put in between the liner and the outside canvas. I ran out of time. I got enough mats to go maybe behind Genevieve's bed here, from the door all the way to behind Genevieve's bed, and I realized that if I was going to continue, I might finish my mats by May. So that wouldn't really do me much. My ancestors, of course, were able to do this because they didn't have to hold down a 40-hour-a-week job and things like that. They could concentrate and focus on that. I have to work 40 hours a week, so I just couldn't put in the time for all of that. So instead I switched to this foam stuff, which is definitely doing the job. It's definitely keeping it warm in here, but I'm really not thrilled about at all. It doesn't use renewable resources. It will probably take thousands of years to break down. I'm definitely going to try to use it for other applications after I'm done with this experiment, so that it can be recycled. But it's definitely a very bittersweet thing to have to use this, but it will keep me warm. Some of it has to be anchored. What's behind the liner has been anchored with slats. So here you can see some slats here. This needs to continue all the way around to keep them tight. You can see where there aren't any. There's quite a few cracks, but on those nights when it gets up to about 100 degrees in here, those little cracks are kind of welcomed.
Yeah.
Where you can see light, obviously if I would have done the whole teepee in this solid foam stuff, it would be quite dark in here. Where you can see the light is, that's bubble wrap from packaging. I got this at an office supply place, and I put 2 layers in there, hoping that would offer some insulation and allow the light to come through. And it seems to be working pretty well. I've put in a false ceiling, which isn't complete yet. It's going to come over tight to the wall, that you can see there, to the insulated wall. But I put in that false ceiling to keep all the hot air from just going straight up into the top of the teepee. Even with it not completed and not being tight around the sides, it really does make a difference. It keeps a lot of heat down here. The door is always the weak point to any shelter. I've lived in a lot of primitive shelters. I've lived in the woods for 1 week each month in a primitive hut, and I've done a lot of experimenting like this. The door is always the weak point, and that's definitely the case with this. This is an excellent teepee, but I'm not pleased with the door at all. Just a second. It has some flaws. In the summertime, it lets in a lot of rain. I have friends with other teepees, and their teepees don't seem to have the same problems as this teepee does with the door. And I'm not experienced with teepees enough to know exactly what the problem is, but I do know that other friends who live in teepees don't have the same problems that I have with the door. So this is the only part of the teepee that I'm not pleased with. I block off the door with a blanket. I tuck it into the sides here, like this, for nighttime, and I tuck it in all the way down the side there. And that keeps out any drafts. It obviously doesn't insulate it as well as this foam does, but it does a good job. And I'm also going to build a a vestibule off the front, which will keep the wind out and so forth. And that should do well. I've been down to 0 in this teepee so far. Well, not in the teepee, outdoors was 0. In here, it was still quite warm. It was still 80 degrees in here, with just a small fire going in the wood stove. On the times that I've had it up to 100 and 120 degrees and so forth, wasn't experienced. I didn't know what to expect, so I packed extra wood in the wood stove, and son of a gun, about an hour or so later, when all that wood was burning at once, even with the dampers closed right up, it was like a sauna in here. So temperature hasn't been a problem. Right now it's cold because we haven't been here. It's Christmas season. We've been doing a lot of visiting, and we stayed overnight at relatives last night. So it's cold in here right now because there hasn't been a fire in here for over 24 hours. But when there's a fire in here, it heats up. You can literally look at my thermometer. Every 5 minutes it climbs 5 to 10 degrees depending on how cold it is outside and how much wood is in there and how open I have the damper. So that's pretty much it.